do wonder if they're listening.
I think they are listening. I think a lot of people are paying attention very carefully to what Congresswoman Cheney is saying. You know, she may be down in the polls, but I would never count a Cheney out in Wyoming. And I also look at her future and is a promising person for women to follow in saying we will lead the way, even if it means leaving our party behind.
The reality is, and you know this, Ellie, because you were on the campaign trail as well as I was for the last presidential, what I heard from a lot of those, particularly suburban women, was the reason they turned away from Trump, who had voted for him previously, was because they were tired of the attacks. They were exhausted by everything. So last night, one of the things he writes about Sarah Matthews is that she's looking for her 15 minutes of fame. Someone who knows going into this that she's putting herself in a position to be attacked and potentially to have security threats against her.
Well, because look, it's very likely that she came forward to testify after seeing her colleague in the former White House testify before her in that emergency session, Cassidy Hutchinson. So the Hutchinson testimony is really a moment where the committee hoped, and it does seem like this has been borne out, that people would see someone coming forward in spectacular fashion with these allegations, and then more people would come forward alongside that. The other reason, and I would just double back a little bit to the conversation around gender here and why it's so important, is in Republican politics, and specifically in Trump world, there's such a push for hyper-masculinity, for machismo. It's something that when you hear the former president say that he called his former vice president a wimp for not overturning the election results, there's so many gendered undertones there. The fact that Congresswoman Cheney is putting out this call and saying that these men are hiding behind executive privilege, that makes them sound like wimps and cowards, very unmasculine. And in Trump world, that's kind of the worst thing that you can say about someone, even though, of course, in this moment, to be female is extremely powerful.
Ali Vitale, Susan Del Percio, thank you both for a great conversation. And up next, this incessant heat wave is continuing. We're going to bring you live reports on its dangerous impact, both here at home and in Europe. You're watching Chris Jansing Reports only on MSNBC. Conditions are drier, and they are adding fuel to the flames of 10 active large fires that have already destroyed dozens of homes and buildings. The same is true in Europe, where wildfires continue to rage out of control. In the south of France, flames have displaced more than 30,000 people from their homes. The firefighters you see battling a blaze in that area, not used to these kinds of conditions. With us now, NBC's George Solis in Philadelphia. Megan Fitzgerald is in Gironde, France. George, I mean, there's not much you can do to prepare for this, but it looks like they're going to have to get ready for even more heat this weekend.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. And a lot of people are coming to area spray grounds like this one here in front of Philadelphia City Hall in an effort to beat the heat. These jets shoot up about 6 feet in the air. And a lot of children out here and their families are taking part in that. Others seeking shade, getting some ice cream, and drinking lots of water to stay hydrated. But as you mentioned, some of this heat very difficult to escape, especially when it blankets you. Honestly, it does feel a little bit like it's stinging on the skin if you're out here for a prolonged time. So the city is advising people to stay indoors, crank up that AC, and again, you can't say it enough, drink a lot of water. Now, earlier today, we did speak to a number of parents out here trying to beat that later afternoon heat with their kids. Some of them, of course, very much concerned for their safety, as well as the safety of people that are out here working. Take a listen.
I feel like every summer it gets a little bit worse, and a little bit like the duration of the humidity and the hotness kind of lasts longer.
Staying cool is a must. Staying hydrated is a must. And I know it's a lot of people that have to work, like all of the people that may be like on the pipeline, laying pipes, and the construction workers. They gotta wear their hard hats. They gotta wear, I say a prayer for them and tell them to stay hydrated too.
Yeah, and the city, of course, taking this very seriously as well. They've extended their heat health emergency, making sure they don't shut off water utilities, and opening up cooling centers for people that may not have AC at home. Chris?
And Megan, when you hear south of France, most people think a dream vacation, right? And then I'm reading things in Gironde, where you are, about tourists literally running for their lives from campsites, trying to get away from wildfires. What is going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. A critical and very serious situation here, Chris. You know, we're looking at more than 50,000 acres that have burned here in the Bordeaux wine country region, the famous wine country region of France. We know that some 2,000 firefighters are on the ground here trying to fight this blaze. They're using these military-style bulldozers to carve a perimeter around it. We've seen here from the command center these...
I want to stop right there. You see what's going on right there pertaining to our trees? Every time we have a mass amount, a gorge or whatever you want to call it, of trees, and this is going on now quite frequently out in California and in other parts of the country, other parts of the planet too as well. Every time you cut down more trees and you burn more trees, you're adding to the problem, because those trees not only create the content that you and me breathe from, but it also works as a filtering system. In the filtering system, it has been in the past towards helping to eliminate a great deal of the carbons that's going up into the atmosphere. Well, the less trees, the less filter. The less filter, the more carbon dioxide. The more carbon dioxide, the more erratic weather patterns that we're seeing. And, you know, it hasn't been, I guess, until just recently, within the past few years, whenever they got to talking about plumes or heat domes coming into an area that's basically, picture the planet Earth being underwater. Let's say it was completely submerged underwater, the whole planet, and there was trillions and trillions of miles of water that was around it. And now we're in this big mass amount of water, and ever so often there would be a bubble that would come up. And the bubble wouldn't necessarily go straight directly counterclockwise to the area against the gravity, but it would actually form and go around the planet, and it would go almost all the way to the top of the planet in that air pocket before it would actually descend on up into the area where it was away from the Earth. That's what our heat conditions are doing right now pertaining to these plumes. And the reason why that it's doing this is because the ice is melting, and you don't have near as much ice that's presenting that cold energy that's pushing against the heat. And then if you'll compare the rest of it pertaining to the cutting down the trees compared to all the carbon dioxide, with so many people now that wanted to step out into the playing field towards having the same things as the Western world had or got, as far as running water, electricity, telephones, automobiles, highways, bridges, etc., etc., etc. This is all a contributing factor to global warming. And until we're going to wake up to this, we're only going to see our planet wreaking havoc more and more and more and more. Now that's on the physical aspect of it. On the supernatural aspect of it, God has been protecting this planet to a certain degree pertaining to our stupidity. But it says in the Bible that God will only wink for a certain length of time pertaining to our ignorances. I believe that it has reached the point of, not only from a physical standpoint of where that we have already went over that threshold, to where now we're seeing things accelerating that they thought that wouldn't happen until 20 and 50, that's now happening in 2022. But whenever you go over that threshold, that what I'm talking about pertaining to the graces of God, to the point that God lifts his protected hand off of society towards letting them endure the things that they have basically produced for themselves. In other words, if you make your bed hard, you sleep in it. That's what's happening here. God is trying to wake the world up, trying to wake people up, and telling them that not only are we destroying our planet, but we're destroying each other, and we're not giving reverence to the Father like we should be, and we're not being obedient to the Father as we should be as far as God's requirements. Now, as long as you and myself are doing what we're supposed to be doing by and large in a wholesome, sincere, authentic way, the Bible speaks very, very clearly that He will not forsake us or leave us, that He sticketh closer than a brother, and that He will be with us even until the ends of the world. But whenever people are playing with God, and they're not sincere in their relationship with God, and they're not being authentic either to themselves or with God, that's whenever God says, you know what, I'm tired of this. You have continued to bite the hand that was feeding you. You didn't appreciate the things that I was doing for you. So now because of that, I'm going to lift my protected hand off of you. And by doing so, this means that Satan and the works of Satan, from a supernatural standpoint, will come down, just as the Bible talks about, in great wrath, because he knoweth his time is short. Yes, the sorrows that the Bible talks about are the sorrows towards not only how we're treating the earth, but how we're treating each other, but most importantly, how we're treating God. Because it's God that's in control, and it's God that can bring cool winds. It's God that can bring rains to put out that fire. It's God that can use compromising tactics pertaining to our stupidity in allowing for the world not to drastically get this hot. But it is. And the sad thing about it is that we as American citizens over here, and I guess the vast majority of the world, are still in climate deniers in identifying just exactly what's going on. Like I said, if you take these plumes or these domes, they call it a heat dome, that last year lasted for months out west, that was brawling and scrawling all the way into places like Arizona, New Mexico, all the way up to Nevada, Arizona, Southern California, Northern California, up towards Colorado, up towards Boise, and up towards Portland, Oregon, and Washington State, that actually went up into Canada for a while, that caused excessive heat conditions that they had never seen before. These plumes, or these domes, are similar towards if you was to put something completely submerged underwater, and let's just say you don't understand what I'm talking about. Let's just use another illustration. Let's use something that's got air in it, like a ball, and it's kind of halfway made out of sponge material, but it's also made out of a great deal of other things, but it's got air content in the middle of it, and whenever you submerge this into the water for a certain length of time, it's going to be producing air pockets. And these air pockets are going to go once more in the opposite direction of the way that the gravity is. You see the way that the smoke is going right now, and the flames are hitting directly up? You see what I'm saying right there? Why is that? Because they're going in the opposite direction of the way that the gravity's pulling. Same way with those air bubbles. The air bubbles are not going to go downwardly, they're going to go upwardly, because the air becomes thinner up there. Very, very much thinner. And they've already done proven it, that it's not so much that hot air is what makes a balloon actually go up, as far as some of the big balloons that people go up into, but it's got something to do with the variation of separating the cold particles from the hot particles, and that's actually what pushes you up. You don't go up because your air is hot. You go up because of the air that's underneath that air that now is pushing that air bubble or whatever up. So it works in the same difference as what we're looking at right here. The sad thing about it is, scientists that's supposed to be the experts should have taken advantage of what that they was looking at as little as 5, 7, 10 years ago, that now this has creeped up on us, and it's accelerating on a remarkable level, to the point that I don't know at this point in time if it can be reversed. I mean, I looked at the equator comparing America basically where Ukraine is, from the equator up. That's basically the only thing that we have to judge anything off of. If you'll go from the equator up to the planet, go from the equator up to the United States and go from the equator up to Ukraine, there's about 500 miles difference. In other words, where I'm at right now in northwest Tennessee, going by the geographics of longitude, latitude, Ukraine would basically hit in the same area somewhere around where Chicago is. But yet now, we're seeing these excessive, massive heat domes that's now going beyond Ukraine and going up into other areas on the opposite side of the world that are heating up in tremendous amounts of conditions. And the thing about it is, only probably 2% or less of the people up in those areas don't have air conditioning. They're not equipped for this type of heat, much less long-term heat. And they're further north than what we are, going up towards the North Pole. So these plumes or these domes are actually in reality growing. They're intensifying, and we're seeing more of them. I done a temperature check, I think it was 3 days ago, pertaining to the temperature down at the Gulf. It's bath water. It is strictly bath water. Why we haven't seen an excessive amount of hurricanes yet this year, I can't really answer that for sure, but I think it's got something to do with the water currents, and also as well with the wind currents. And they have been getting hurricanes west of Mexico or west of the Panama Canal, going up into the colder water, going up towards like Hawaii, but usually they pretty well spew out because the water over there is so much more tremendously cold, because it is being influenced still, thank God, by the glaciers, the ice glaciers up north. But you know, whenever all those ice glaciers melt and there is no more cold, and the water over there gets as hot as what the water is in the Gulf, do you realize how unpredictable that the hurricane season is going to be? Do you realize how badly that storms could produce towards actually seeing tornadoes develop even as far north as out west in California, etc., and extending, seeing a little bit of hurricane activity? We would see hurricane activity that could actually go as far north as hitting places in Alaska or Russia, on the other side of the world. It's getting proportionally out of balance, and as it's getting out of balance, it's like a child throwing a tantrum, and it's crying. The world is crying out. Mother Nature is hemorrhaging, kind of like a person that gets a bad cut. The world is hemorrhaging right now, and we're not paying close enough attention to why that it's hemorrhaging the way that it's hemorrhaging. Well, Jesus said that in the last days, because of mankind, he already foreseen that these things was going to occur. He said that in the last days that there would be distress upon to the nations, that we would see signs in the heavens and signs upon the earth such as we've never seen before, and that all these would be the beginning of the great sorrows that will in fact be falling upon this planet Earth sooner rather than later, in regards towards the Great Tribulation. And if that's where we don't care towards going, then we need to continue to keep doing what we're doing towards cutting down the trees and not accelerating the problems pertaining to global warming. And I guarantee you, probably within my lifetime, it will get so unbearable, not only in places like France and Germany and England and Ukraine and on up into the places like that, but it will get so irregularity unstable to the point that we really won't know what to expect from one year to another pertaining to these domes, these heat domes, or these plumes that are forming that are now circling over certain parts of the planet, and some parts of the planet gets affected worse than others. You know, last year was a really intense year for us over out west, but now they're already discovering that the state of Oklahoma, as of about 3 days ago, for the first time on record, every county in the state of Oklahoma registered in the 3-digit plus range, and some of them registered as high, the way I understand it, as about 109, 110 degrees. That was the first time that has been recorded that every county in the state of Oklahoma compassed the 3-digit mark. And they've been keeping up with records in Oklahoma. The Sooners have, I guess, ever since they planted their stakes and decided that they was going to homestead out there, way before Andrew Jackson run the Cherokee and the Native American Indians over into that area. They've been keeping up with their records too. So these things aren't diminishing and going away. They're intensifying. They're getting worse. And it has accelerated on levels that the scientists and the professionals, the experts, never would have dreamed towards what we're seeing right now. And I contribute a lot of this problem right now is because during the time that COVID hit, basically half the planet shut down, other than the bare necessities, towards the traveling with the cars, and traveling with the airplanes. We've seen, scientists, NASA, seen a great deal of ozones that started building themselves back. I don't know for sure how thick the ozone layer is. I think it has dwindled down to about 9, maybe 10 miles thick that surround the planet. And of course, if we had instruments to measure the ozone going back 100 years ago, if we could have went back 100 years ago towards measuring the ozone was probably twice that thick, which meant twice that amount of protection. Well, as the ozone is breaking down and getting thinner and thinner and thinner, also is the protection. And last couple years, they noticed an increase in the ozone, and now all of a sudden this year, everybody wants, they're tired of the pandemic. They want to get back into their lives of normalcy if they can. They want to go to the beaches. They want to go to the theaters. They want to go to parks. They want to go swimming. They want to enjoy life for what it's worth, and they want to get back on the roads and do their thing. And because of the excessiveness that now has just energized all them greenhouse gases, minus all the trees being destroyed, minus all the ice being melted, all that is a recipe of doom and gloom. And if we as a society don't wake up to the signs that are being issued out before the planet right now, God, I promise you, God will throw us off in the great tribulation. And according to Daniel, that will be a time of trouble such as mankind has never ever seen before. And I promise you, in 1929, whenever the stock market crashed over here in America, it was a time of trouble. I promise you, whenever Pearl Harbor got attacked, it was a time of trouble. I promise you, when other skirmishes happened throughout the planet, regardless whether it was Korean War, the Vietnam War, or Desert Storm, or Desert Shield, or the Afghanistan War, and now we're looking at the Ukrainian War, in addition to all the other stuff that's going on in Yemen and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I promise you, God will throw us off in the great tribulation to the point that he will come back in flaming fire, according to the Bible, taking vengeance upon them who know not him, and upon them who obey not him, and he will burn down every structure upon this planet, if it's burnable, regardless whether it's commercialized or privatized, and all the smoke will go up into the atmosphere, and that's whenever teetotal hell will bust loose on the planet. And if you want to be here during that time, good luck to you, because I don't want to be here. I don't want to be part of that, because that will be whenever the false prophet and the Antichrist will rule up and reign towards people actually taking the mark of the beast 666. That a lot of people today are starting to categorize that as the new global world order. And maybe it will be. I don't know. I personally believe that we need to try to repair the order that we presently have, our old order, because before 2 or 3 years ago, things was halfway running decently pertaining to the internationally alliances that we had already formed towards this country, helping that country with their necessities, and that country helping this country, and vice versa. I mean, the exchange was doing fairly well for itself up until COVID, and now up until this war that happened over in Ukraine. So yes, God will throw us off into great tribulation if we do not turn from our sinful and wicked ways, just as it speaks of in the first 3 chapters of Revelations. Repent, 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 for I've not found thy works perfect yet. And if thou do not repent, I will throw thee off into a great tribulation, and I will kill her children. It does not tiptoe around those expressions towards what God is going to do, because man is destroying the earth. It says that God will come back and destroy man. We're going to have to wake up, and we're going to have to do so urgently, not moderately, but urgently.
And are these helicopters taking off, dropping fire retardant on the flames there? This is an all hands on deck approach. We're even seeing neighbors that have been jumping in, farmers that are using their water irrigation tanks to go to the front lines to fill up these fire engines so that the firefighters have enough water to continue this fight. As you mentioned, thousands of people have evacuated here. There's a popular tourist attraction here, the Sand Dune, which is a campsite. We know that people had to evacuate quickly as those flames were just rushing in. But if there is a bit of good news here, it's that the fire at the moment is contained. They're telling us that.
Now, keep in mind, as they're draining all these resources out of the ground pertaining to their aqueducts, the underground streams that goes underground to be able to put these fires out, they're draining those aqueducts. Kind of similar towards what's happening right now with Lake Mead in growing all their agriculture out in Southern California. The only thing that supplies that plant life is basically a bunch of irrigation systems that get their water from the aqueducts, okay, from the underground tunnels. It's showing here that summer of 2022 breaks heat records worldwide, and these are the places: 104 in England, Portugal, Iran, China, 105. I mean, these are all tattletale signs that, once more, scientists didn't think that we would be where we are right now until about 20 and 50. Now we're seeing them in 2022. So you have to start asking yourself the question, okay, if we're already in trouble now in 2022, what is it actually going to be like in 20 and 50? If these things has accelerated on the level that they have right now pertaining to global warming, what do you think is going to occur in 2050? And I'm 61, so that'd make it 61, 71, 80. That'd make me 91 years old. Whenever I'm 91 years old, 30 years from now, basically, or 30 some odd years from now, less than 100 years old, providing that I live that long, which hopefully I will. Can you only imagine what those same temperatures are going to look like then? Because they have proven, looking at the patterns, that the earth is extremely getting hotter and hotter and hotter every year. So if we don't open up our eyes towards engineering new techniques in how we travel and how we live, and eliminating some of our airplane travel and trying to get a grip on this thing, it's a possibility by 20 and 50 that these temperatures will be so intense that in places of the world will be uninhabitable. Kind of like Death Valley. God only knows how hot it's going to be in Death Valley this year, with the temperatures doing like they're doing. But then again, that plume may not particularly follow suit over into that area. We don't know just yet, because we're just now starting to get into some of our dog days. But you look at Iran at 126. I think it is registered 137 has been the highest temperature on the earth, which has come from Death Valley. They're just north of Yuma, Arizona, in between California and the state of Arizona in the Bajas. If it's getting 126 in Iran that they ain't never seen before, if that same heat dome comes back over here again, it could actually break all-time records pertaining to the records that's already been broke in Death Valley. We're getting hotter, folks. People's health will only sustain a certain amount of this heat before their body starts deteriorating and tearing down, especially those that are already vulnerable pertaining to the weak, the young, and the old. In addition to draining the water supply, the natural resources out of the ground with our aqueducts, that has a big effect on how places like Lake Mead or the Colorado River gets filled back up again. People need to start waking up to what is happening, and they need to do it with urgency. Urgency.
In the heat there.
You know, Chris, that's the big concern here, is that we are seeing these severe temperatures from London to Portugal to Spain into Italy, and in the path of those extreme heat, we're seeing these wildfires breaking out, and so that's the biggest concern, is that the heat is drying the area, and then just the smallest spark is sparking these fires. I mean, you look at what we're seeing in Italy right now, where 9 cities are under these severe weather alerts, the severe temperature alerts. There's fires that are breaking out in the northern part of the country. Not just that, but they've jumped the border into Slovenia. So this is a major issue that's happening all throughout Europe, and these firefighters are on the ground, working around the clock, doing everything they can to try
and then whenever it's winter here,
Europe, and these firefighters are on the ground working.
Whenever it's winter here, in January through March, is whenever the world basically turns on its axis, and the upper levels of the earth that are now going to the North Pole will be going the opposite direction, and in places like Australia get heat conditions and get bombarded by droughts such as they've never seen before. So it's not just only one side of the planet during the hottest times of the year that we're seeing these erratic weather patterns, but it's on one side of the equator just like it is the other side of the equator. So you have to put all this into focus in your equation after you get through looking at this with these patterns and say, you know what, there really is something to the world warming up the way that it's warming up. And oh yeah, we've been telling you that now for 30, 40, 50 years, and nobody wanted to take it into an account, and now it's catching up with not only the Americans but the world. We want to thank you again for your time. Good luck for each and every one of us pertaining to these massive weather events. God bless you. God bless America. God bless our troops. And shalom.